last class, if you recall, we had discussed the course plan, and I had also requested your CR to find out in case the students have any issues with the course plan or the evaluation scheme or the class scheduling and all, but there has been no comment that has come forth, so I think everyone is okay with it. So let's get started. In the last class, yes, good afternoon, Ujjwal. Do you have something to say or ask? उज्जवल कि सिर्फ गुड आफ्टरनून कर रहे थे तुम? So in that case, good afternoon to you too. Okay, great. Good afternoon to you too, Ujjwal. So basically what had happened was that we started off with the basics of entrepreneurship. And this was basically for the benefit of people who have not done MSL 307 under me. But that was just an introductory thing. Now today we will get started with the financial accounting aspect. And it could again be new to most people who have not done MSL 307. So please, wherever you have a doubt or a question, please stop me and ask, because this is the first time you're doing these concepts. It is very important that you get your doubts clarified before we move on. Okay, don't sit with the doubt in your head. Okay, so I hope that we have that deal and we can get started. Okay.
Excuse me, ma'am.
Yes, Harshita.
Ma'am, I think Abhinav floated a Google form in which people said that they were fine with the outline, course outline.
Okay.
Most of the people, and I think Abhinav can brief you more. And many people also commented that they would like the term paper to be a group assignment.
The term paper to be a group assignment.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Majority of the class.
Okay, so I think if I recall just let me go back to the evaluation scheme. I'm going to share my screen. Just a second. Okay, let me go back to the evaluation scheme. So you basically want the term paper to be a group assignment, right? So that is fine, and I hope that the group formations are happening. The CR's name is Harshita. The CR's name is Abhinav.
Yes, ma'am.
Abhinav, I hope that the group assignment is happening. Sorry, the group formations are happening. Okay, fine. So if you do the term paper also as a group assignment, then it will be 50% worth of group assignments and 50% worth of individual assignments. So I hope that is fine. That is.
Ma'am, but the entire class haven't responded to that survey, so
So
let's just wait till they
okay,
all
okay. I
respond.
would want a majority thing, because I don't want anyone to, then cry after that. Okay. So we can wait for that. And Abhinav, how are the group formations shaping up? Abhinav, are you here? I don't think he's here. Okay. So Harshita, we'll wait for Abhinav to join, because I don't think he's here to give a feedback to us.
Yes, ma'am. I'll just
Yeah.
text him once.
Yeah, in the meanwhile, we can get started with the rest of the syllabus. Okay. So today we will discuss the introduction to business organizations, and as I said earlier, in case you have any doubts, any questions, please unmute yourself and ask. Okay, so that the information is complete. Fine. Now, any company or any form of business organization, once it gets incorporated, the specific kind of business organization is governed by the regulatory framework around it. Okay, so companies are governed differently, partnerships are governed differently, societies are governed differently, and so on. There are different tax rates that may apply to it. Okay, and the features of that organization are also different. So we have to look at the different forms of business organization and then see the characteristics of these organizations. So for example, a private limited company cannot raise equity capital by issuing shares to the general public. So a private limited company cannot come out with an IPO. We can't buy shares of that company and so on. And a company in which foreign shareholding, that is the owners of that business, is foreign, may not be allowed to undertake certain activities. Now, before I discuss all of this, I wanted to ask you all, do you understand who a shareholder is? Can someone tell me who a shareholder is? Because not many of you have done MSL 307. Can anyone hazard a guess? Who do you think a shareholder is? Owner of a business and so on?
Ma'am, someone who has a stake in the business.
Who has taken the business?
Yes,
Stake
someone
in the business.
like someone who has a part of the business. Like
Part
he
of the
owns,
business in what sense, Ronit?
like he owns some part of the business, such
Okay.
as like I have 1,000 shares of a company.
Hmm.
So and a company proposes a lakh shares.
Huh.
So that means he has 1% of the business.
Okay, very good, Ronit. Very good. You're absolutely right. So, for example, if Ronit and his batchmate today decide to have their own startup and they get registered as a company, and both Ronit and his batchmate or his friend, they have put in 50,000 of their own money into that startup, into financing that startup. Now, what Ronit has done is he has put in hard cash of 50,000 into the business, and his friend has, instead of giving cash, he has brought his laptop which will be used for that business, and that laptop is worth 50,000. Okay, so one has brought in capital in cash and the other has brought in capital in kind. Okay, this is called capital. Capital is any form of money that can be used to generate resources or products or services for the company. Okay, since both of them are carrying a value of 50,000, both of them are equal shareholders, okay, or they have 50% shareholding in that company, and the total share capital of the company is 1 lakh. Okay, so as Ronit said, it is proportional to the amount of shares that you own, and typically the amount of shares means the proportion of money that you have with respect to the overall capital. Now, Ronit and his friend continue doing business and everything is fine, but now they want to expand. Okay, so they might go and approach a bank and they can say that we want a loan, we have a company and we need a loan for 10 years, 5 years, whatever. The bank will give them a loan only if they have stable earnings and they have some assets of the company that they can use as collateral. Okay, so when the bank gives a loan, it is called a debt instrument, DEBT, debt instrument. Now, the basic feature of a debt instrument is that it carries a fixed rate of return which is called interest. So debt is always associated with interest, 15%, 10%, whatever, and it has a fixed time period that is required. So debt will be repaid in 6 months, 1 year, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, whatever it is. Okay. Typically, the person who gives you a debt instrument would ask you for an asset as collateral. So, company की अपनी plant, machinery, building, जो भी है, that can be used as mortgage against that loan. So that in case the company goes through a recession or the earnings of the business fall, then the bank can then take this asset, sell it off, and recover its money. Okay, so debt becomes a contractual kind of a agreement between the lender and the borrower. So this is the feature of a debt. Now, debt is known by different nomenclatures. If you take it from a bank, it is called a loan. If you take it from some person or another company, it is called a borrowing. If you take it from the government, it is called a bond. If you go to the general public through a stock exchange and take debt from them, it is called a debenture. Okay, but all of these are debt instruments. Equity shareholding indicates ownership. So when Ronit and his friend became owners of that business, they agreed to be with the business through thick and thin. So after paying off everyone, if there is any money left in the business, then it belongs to the owners. And God forbid, if the business has to make any losses, then that is also borne by the owners only. Okay. So for equity shareholders who have brought in their equity, their ownership, there is unlimited risk, because if the business falls, then they have to bear all that, all their losses, because they don't have any legal contractual obligation that the company will give them this much money within this time or something. They are behaving as owners. Okay, So in this case, the equity becomes different from debt in the sense that debt becomes a safer kind of an investment because it is protected by law, it has a fixed rate of return, it has assets that can act as collateral and so on. But equity shareholders are the true owners of a business and they conduct the business as per their requirement. Okay. Now, another thing can happen is as Ronit and his friends' business expands, suppose they don't have, the bank is not giving them too much of a loan. The bank is saying, I can only give you this much loan, but they have very good growth plans. What they might do is they might decide to go public, in which case they will approach a stock exchange like Bombay Stock Exchange, National Stock Exchange, or any other regional stock exchange, and they would get listed over there after fulfilling certain legal requirements. And then they would come up with what is called an IPO, initial public offering. Okay. Here they will dilute their shareholding. By diluting, I mean right now they are 50% shareholders. Then they will limit their shareholding to say 20%, and the rest of the 60% they will then spread out or issue amongst millions of people like you and me, who will then become shareholders of little amounts of shares. Okay, so they have basically diluted their ownership and shared their ownership amongst millions of other people. So everyone else becomes part owner in the same proportion as the number of shares that they hold. Okay, just like Ronit said. Now all of us are owners. Suppose all of us buy shares of Ronit's company. All of us are owners, but we don't have the time or the inclination to go and sit in the company and manage its day-to-day operations. Okay, so what we do is, just like all of you elect a CR to represent you or to become your representative when dealing with anyone else, similarly shareholders also elect their representatives. These representatives can be shareholders themselves. Okay, these representatives are called directors. You must have heard of the word director. They're called directors. Now, all of the directors get together and form what is called board of directors for a company, board of directors. Or you must have also heard of the word board. It means the board of directors. These are all representations or representatives of the shareholders. They sit in the company, they meet from time to time, and they chart out the course for the business. Kya banayenge, who will we sell it to, where would we expand, where will we be located, etc., etc. Okay. Now, more often than not, these directors may not be trained in that particular domain in which the company is working. Okay, mostly shareholders bring money to the table. They may not have the professional acumen to actually manage the company, especially if it's a technology driven company and so on. So what they do is they hire executives, people like you who have graduated from top institutions in the country or in the world, and they appoint them as CEOs, CFOs, CTOs, CXOs and all, who are basically employees of the business, and they tell them, listen, this is what we want you to do with our company, so please now execute. Okay, so all of these people who are employed by the board of directors as the top executives of the company are paid a salary, and they act as agents of the board. Okay, so the board decides what has to be done and they execute it. So the board becomes principal. So I'm now talking in legal terms. In contractual law, the board becomes the principal and the managers become the agents. Okay, so this is the basic structure of how any company or any formal organization is governed. Any doubts, any questions so far? Okay, now all of you know that the Indian government has allowed for foreign direct investment in our country, which basically means that we have allowed foreign companies where the ownership or shareholding is foreign, it's non-Indian, to come and start up their factories and set up their plants here. Okay, but there still are some sectors where the government does not allow 100% foreign ownership. For example, in insurance, the government wants the foreign partners to come in, foreign companies to come in and partner with an Indian partner. Also in space exploration we have not, or nuclear energy we have not allowed for 100% FDI or foreign ownership. In defense also some parts are open now, but a large number of areas are still not open to foreign ownership. The reason is we want to respect and protect our own sovereignty. So the government can come out with such regulations from time to time that we will allow this much of foreign ownership, this much of FDI and so on. Okay, so that happens. So this is what is mentioned in the first slide. So if I go back to the first slide, a company in which foreign shareholding is 100% may not be allowed to undertake certain activities. Okay, so I hope that this is clear to all of you. Any doubts, any questions so far? Please ask. Okay. Now let us look at the different forms of business organization. The first one and the simplest one is called sole proprietorship. As the name suggests, it means one owner, sole proprietor. Okay. It is a business owned by a single person. Legally, the owner and company have the same status. Owner realizes all the profits, bears all the losses and incurs all the liabilities of the business. So for example, all the Kirana stores that you see around you, or Gupta stores at IIT, or Tiwari stationers, or whatever these stores that you see here are all sole proprietorships. The store is typically known by the name of the proprietor. Okay, he or she is the single owner of that shop. He or she may hire employees to deliver stuff or to stack the shelves or something, but he is the only owner. Legally, the business and the owner is considered the same. So tomorrow if he goes and takes a loan for his shop, and if the shop is not making enough earnings to pay off that loan, then his personal assets can be used by the bank to pay off the loan. Okay, so his house can be taken as mortgage, his bank balance can be attached, his own car can be used, so his own assets can be used to pay off the company's liabilities. Okay, the advantage in this is it is very easy to set up. Very few government regulations are there. There is no firm tax rate. The person is taxed as per the income tax slab that he falls into. So all of you know that we have 5 sources of income in our income tax. So this becomes one of the sources of income. Okay. The limitation is that when the owner dies, the company also dies because there is no one else. The second is that the personal liability is unlimited. As long as the shop is doing well, it's okay. But suppose the shop has taken money from someone and the shop is not doing very well, then the personal assets of the owner can be attached and he would be personally liable to pay off that loan. Okay. And the ability to raise funds is severely constrained naturally because you're the only person there. And that is why you will find millions of such small store owners who are continuing that way for many years. Okay, because they just don't have the ways and means to raise a lot of extra capital. Okay, so this is the first form of business organization. Any doubts, any questions, please ask. Okay. Then the second form of business organization is called a partnership. It is governed by the Partnership Act of 1932, and it is basically a business that is owned by 2 or more persons. The partners bear the risks of the business and also reap the rewards of the business, and it comes into existence with the execution of a partnership deed. So the main document that is there is called the partnership deed. Now a partnership typically is made for a profession. Okay, so if you're an accountant or you're a consultant or you're doctors or you're lawyers and you have a professional service to offer, then it is typically a good idea for 2 or 3 professionals to come together and start up a practice there, because then they'll be able to attract more business instead of working as a sole service provider. So all our top legal firms, whether you look at Amarchand Mangal Das, Anand and Anand and so on, Tri-Legal, all of them are partnership firms. If you look at the top consulting firms also, Deloitte, FAS, yeah, McKinsey, Ernst and Young, all of these are partnership firms. Okay, so they are basically formed by professionals who are there to give a service, and the partnership firm is also known by the founding partners. So Amarchand Mangaldas are known by the founding partners Amarchand and Mangaldas. Anand and Anand is known by the the father-son duo of Praveen Anand and his son. So they are also known by those individuals. Okay, because the person is the main um, uh, you know um, main person because of which the business is coming in. It is coming in because Mr. Amarchand is there. Fine. So this is how a partnership comes into account. So if you ever think of setting up a partnership, be very sure that you are providing a professional service. The advantage is it can be set up quite easily. You can benefit from the expertise and experience of the partners, and it is relatively free from government regulation. Not too much of disclosure or anything is required. The limitation is that life is limited to death or withdrawal of any of the partners. So first it used to be limited partnership, where in case any one of the partner dies or becomes insolvent or becomes of an unstable mind, unsound mind, then the partnership had to be dissolved. Okay, but recently there has been an amendment, and now you can have unlimited partnerships, in the sense that if one partner dies, then that partnership is given over to his successor. Okay, so that company continues, because otherwise if someone dies, then suddenly the business was coming to an end. Okay, personal conflict among partners is a potential threat. Yes, if partners are not working together, then that can create a lot of issues. Personal liability of the partners is unlimited. Now initially, again, this used to be there, the unlimited liability clause, but now recently this has also been constrained and amended, and now you have limited liability partnership. So if you would have seen, you would have seen the word LLP given after a partnership firms. It means that it's a limited liability partnership. That is, the partner declares that in case of any wrongdoing, in case of any loss, anything, my liability to the partnership is limited to X amount, and no one can then claim more than that from him or her. Okay, ability to raise funds is limited, again because they are functioning in a private kind of a setup. The partners are the ones who are putting in their equity stake, and the business is generating money. That is it. They don't have too many options to raise funds. Of course they can go to a bank to raise debt. Okay, so this is how a partnership is formed, and I've given you multiple examples of a partnership firm as well. Any doubts, any questions?
Ma'am,
Yes.
so the only basic difference between a sole proprietorship and partnership is that there are two or more person in a partnership, and they share all the benefits and liabilities together.
Yes, and Ujjwal, the other difference is that typically in a sole proprietorship, you have people who have shops and who are selling, small products and services like kirana store, stationers, and so on. But a partnership is always defined by a professional service that they are providing. So they are either lawyers or accountants or doctors or consultants and so on. Okay.
Okay, thank you, ma'am.
Okay. Okay. Thanks, Ujjwal. Okay. So anyone else? Okay. So moving on. Now, the third form of business organization, which I know you will not form, but you may be a part of one, is called a cooperative society. A society which has as its objective the promotion of economic interest of its members in accordance with cooperative principles. Now, this was formed basically after India gained independence. It was formed by Pandit Nehru, and he was inspired by the communist way of functioning of erstwhile Soviet Union and so on. And he understood that India has a large population of very poor people who are not able to get together to collectively bargain. Okay, so for example, milk producers, farmers, are not able to bargain very well about the prices of their products or service in the market. Okay, so this cooperative society is basically to get such people together so that they find unity and strength in numbers, and then they can function as a unit. Okay, so there is no limit on maximum members in a cooperative society, but a minimum of 10 members are required, and it is registered under the Registrar of Cooperative Societies, governed by the Cooperative Societies Act of 1961. And the management is vested in the managing committee elected by members on the principle of one member, one vote. Now, the prime example of a very successful cooperative society in our country is Amul. Okay, which brought about the white revolution in getting together milk producers from different villages. Another very popular example is IFCO, a fertilizer cooperative, which is basically the government promoted it initially, and they got some 60,000 farmers as their cooperative society members, and then it continued to do so well that a few years ago the farmers actually paid back the government, and now it is completely owned by farmers. Okay, so in a country like India, where such a large number of population is there who are small time producers, a cooperative society is a great way to get all of these people together. Then another very popular cooperative society is Seva, if you've heard of this. It is basically a society of village women who together work and produce lijjat papad, if you've heard of that. Okay, so and आपका जो scoops है यहाँ पे, that is also a cooperative society. Most of the alumni organizations are cooperative societies. It is basically getting people together to manage their economic interests. Okay, so this is governed by the Cooperative Societies Act of 1961, and here were some examples of a cooperative society. Okay, any doubt, any question, please ask. Okay, so this is a table which I scanned from a book, which basically gives the strengths and weaknesses of the common legal forms of business organization. So you can read about that. I will come to the company separately, but this was basically for that. Does not contain a cooperative society. In this, it contains sole proprietorship, partnership, and corporation or company. Now we come to the most popular form of business organization, which is a joint stock company. Okay, and here we have two distinctions. We have a private company or a public company. So joint stock company is a form of an organization which is capable of mobilizing large amount of capital with provision of limited liability for owners and affording professional management to conduct its business. So the three most important things is it's only a company that has the legal backing to actually go to the public and issue shares and raise money from them. Okay. Second, it has a provision of limited liability for owners. Okay. Now, what is limited liability? Let me tell you. Suppose initially when I bought the share of a company, it had a face value of 10 rupees. Now these days, because our stock markets are doing so well, typically IPOs are oversubscribed and shares are sold at a premium. So a 10 rupee face value of a share is sold at a premium of 100, 200, whatever. But that was not always the case. In the early 70s, when India started having a tryst with shares and all that, that was basically pioneered by Reliance. At that time, if the face value of a share was 10 rupees and the company issued that, the first step was that the people used to subscribe to it. Okay, so suppose a company says, I am issuing shares, each share is of 10 rupees. Please let me know in case you want to buy my shares and how many shares would you buy. So I as an investor would then write to the company and say, I am interested in buying 10 shares of 10 rupees each. So I have subscribed to 10 shares. So when the company receives my letter, it would then include me as a shareholder, and then the company would make a call on the share. So the company will say, okay, my shareholder, my first call is for ₹2 on the share. So please send me the money. So for the number of shares that I am subscribed to, I will send 2 rupees per share. I will write a check and send it to the company. Now the unpaid amount left on my share is 8 rupees. Okay, and the company will take 2 rupees per share, and company will start doing its business and buying material and setting up factories and all that. Now after a little while, the company may call again and say, dear shareholder, now we are calling for say 3 more rupees on the share, on each share. So again I will pay 3 rupees per share and send a check, and now the unpaid amount that is left is 5 rupees per share. So at any point of time, in case the business goes under or someone sues the company for money, then my liability is only limited to the unpaid amount on the face value of the share. So I as a shareholder can only be asked to cough up 5 rupees per share, not more than that. This is a brilliant concept of limited liability in a company form of business organization. Okay. And suppose I have paid 10 rupees in the beginning only. Now law cannot touch me for what the company is doing because I have already paid up the liability on each share. Okay. So this is the concept of limited liability. Okay. Any doubts, any questions, please ask. Okay. So this is the definition and characteristics of a company. It's given under section 212 of the Companies Act of 2013. A company is an artificial person created by law having a separate entity with perpetual succession and a common seal. So in this definition only, most of the characteristics of a company are already given. The company is an artificial person. Once created, the company is known by its own name and it is recognized as an artificial person in the eyes of law. So ABC Limited is an artificial person in the eyes of law. ABC can sue someone and it can be sued by anyone also. So it's a legal person. Second, it is a voluntary associations of persons. So anyone who wants to be part owner of the business can get together and voluntarily agree to form a company. There is no compulsion. Third, it's a separate legal entity. So if promoters have started a company, the moment the company gets registered, it becomes an artificial separate person and the promoters are separate people. So the company can sue its promoters or the promoters can sue the company. Okay, so they become two separate legal entities. Even though the promoters and owners would be managing the entire company, because naturally the company is not a real person, but still they are separate legal entities. Okay. The next is a company has perpetual succession. Once a company gets created, it will continue to exist. The only way a company can die is by an act of law. So the company is created by an act of law and a company dies by an act of law. And how does that act of law get initiated? It only gets initiated when a company is sued for non-payment of dues. So only if company gets into a financial obligation and is unable to fulfill it, can the people who have lent money to it sue the company, and only then will the law step in and start bankruptcy procedures. So when bankruptcy procedures will start, the assets of the company would be sold off, people would be paid off, and then the company would be legally wound up. Wound up matlab it will then die legally. Okay. It doesn't matter if the promoters die, the company will continue to live forever. Every shareholder has limited liability, like I just told you. It acts through its agents called directors. Now, company is the main body and the company's agents are its owners or directors, and the directors' agents are the management. Okay, the CEO, CTO, and all the executives. The common seal acts as the official signature of a company. You must have seen a company stamp. Even IIT has a stamp. Because the company cannot personally sign, the common seal acts as the official signature, and that is why you must be hearing seal लगवा के लाइए, सिर्फ signature से नहीं चलेगा, seal लगवा के लाइए, because that acts as the official signature of that company. Okay, so these are some of the characteristics of a company. Any doubts, any questions, please ask. Now, most of you when you start off your companies, you will start it up as a company, because I'm sure that pretty much all of you would be having a product or a service idea in mind. You are not professionals, unless of course you get into engineering services, where then you can be professionals who are giving a service. But I think most of you would have a product or a service around which you would want to build up your startup. So a company becomes a business organization form of choice. Okay. Okay. Now, how do you register a company? So, as I was giving you the example of Ronit and his friend, he is the promoter who conceives and develops an idea of starting a company. So, he is the person who has developed the business plan around that idea, probably also developed an MVP or a prototype. And then he says that now I want to start a company. Okay. And you fill up two documents. One is called memorandum of association. We'll go through all of that later in the third module. And the second is articles of association. You get it vetted by lawyers and chartered accountants, and then you file that application with the registrar of companies. Every state has its own ROC office. In Delhi it is in CP, and you go and fill up the forms and submit it there. So here are the documents and what is to be included in that. MOA lays down the name of the company, the name of the state in which its registered office is situated. So what is the registered office? What is the objective of the company? What is the company wanting to do? A statement clearly stating that the liability of the shareholders is limited. The amount of capital with which the company is registered together with its division into shares. So you must say that I have brought in 50,000, the other promoter has brought in 50,000. So we are registering the company with 1 lakh, and the shares are divided in 1:1 ratio. He has 5,000 shares, I have 5,000 shares. Okay, total number of shares are 10,000. And then there is a subscription clause. A memorandum of association must be signed by 7 members in case of a public limited company and by 2 members in case of a private company. So if you want to start off a private company, you must have at least 2 people in that promoter group who will sign the MOA. Okay. The second document that you need to submit is the articles of association. This is basically the bylaws or regulations to govern the internal affairs of the company. For example, transfer of shares, how would shares be transferred? Forfeiture of shares, how would shares be forfeited? The qualification, powers and duties of directors, etc. So this document kind of lays out the internal governance policy of the company. Okay. After this, you need the consent of directors. So here you may have the promoters acting as directors. Okay, they have to give a written consent that I am agreeing to be a director of this company and I will lead it through its operations. Okay. Then you have to have statutory declarations by a legal corporate affairs lawyer or a company secretary or a CA that all requirements of the Companies Act have been fulfilled. So companies are governed by the Companies Act of 2013. Initially, this act was Companies Act of 1956. But after a series of very major amendments in the Companies Act, we now have a new Companies Act which came into force in 2013. Okay, so you will have someone who knows the act in and out, and they would give a statutory declaration that whatever information was required, everything has been fulfilled as per the Companies Act. Okay, and if the registrar of companies is satisfied with the documents, he issues a certificate which is called the certificate of incorporation. Right? So he'll go through all the documentations, all the statutory declarations, everything. If he finds that everything is in order, it seems like a okay company, then he issues a certificate of incorporation. And once that is issued, the company is legally born. Okay, so this is the process through which a company gets registered and incorporated. Okay, any doubts, any questions so far? Let me see if there are any messages anywhere. Okay, I think everyone is understanding very well, so I will continue. Okay. Now, when a company wants to go public or wants to attract more shareholders, then it has to fill up a prospectus. As the name suggests, prospectus defines the prospects or future plans of the company. And the details of the prospectus are given in section 236 of the Companies Act. Now, all of you, please don't worry. Companies Act is freely available online. It's a very thick document. I have a hard copy also in case you want to go through it. Everything is given in great detail in the Companies Act. So a prospectus means an invitation to the public for the subscription of its shares or debentures. It must be dated and signed by all the directors and a copy must be filed with the registrar. So registrar office ke bahar you will find hard copies of the prospectus being sold on the street by vendors. And basically, whenever you're looking for shares, public issues, you will list out that this is what we plan to do. This is our 5-year projection of financial statements. This is our strategy. We hope to earn this much. So please buy our shares and so on. So it becomes like a marketing kind of a document where you list out all your details and you ask for subscription. Okay, so that is the prospectus. Now we have already discussed this. I told you that typically every company has two types of capital. One is your share capital and the other is the loan or debenture or debt capital. Okay, so it's more commonly known as debt capital. What is a share? The capital of a company is divided into a number of equal parts. Each part is called a share. And the Companies Act also defines it very vaguely. It says that a share in the share capital of a company is a share. Okay. The person who contributes money through shares is called a shareholder. The certificate stating the number of shares a shareholder holds is called a share certificate. Initially, we used to have a hard copy of share certificates, but after a lot of frauds and forgery and all of that, now we have demat accounts, that is dematerialized share certificates. Okay, so you have to create a online demat account where the online copy of your share certificates is given. Okay, just to protect the authenticity of share certificates. Now, in shares, there are basically two kinds. One is the equity share that we have been discussing about, the ordinary share capital. The other is called a preference share. Now, preference share is like a hybrid instrument. It is a share, all right. So, it gives the owner ownership rights in the company, but it also carries a fixed rate of dividend. Now, dividend is the income that is given to shareholders on their shares. So it carries a fixed rate of dividend, just like any other debt security, just like they carry 10% interest, 12% interest. Similarly, preference shares carry 10%, 15% dividends. Okay, and they have to be paid. So it's a hybrid instrument. Now, a preference share can be cumulative. That is, suppose 1 year you're supposed to pay 10% preference dividend, but the company did not make enough earnings. So the company says, sorry, this year I haven't been able to pay. Now next year I will pay you for both the years cumulated. In second year also, if they're not able to pay, then in third year they will pay for all the 3 years combined. Okay, so this is called cumulative preference shares. If the company is still not able to meet the accumulation payment after 3 years, then the preference shareholders can take legal action against the company, can fire management people, can look at the board and interfere and all of that. Okay. Non-cumulative shares, as the name suggests, are not cumulative in nature. If the company is not able to pay preference dividend, then it lapses. Okay. Participating preference shares are ones in which the company has surplus profits, then that is also distributed amongst the preference shareholders. So not only do they get the preference dividend associated with them, but they also get a share in the net profit that the company makes along with that preference dividend. Okay, so these are called participating shares. And then you have non-participating shares, where of course you just get the preference dividend. Okay. Convertible preference shares are those preference shares that can be converted into ordinary equity shares after a certain time period. So you have these different features of preference shares as well. Okay. Any doubts, any questions, please ask. Now, in the memorandum of association, the company must state the amount of capital with which the company is desired to be registered and the number of shares into which it is to be divided. Okay. So the company will say that I want to have so much of share capital and each share will be of 10 rupees. So total number of shares will be this much. Okay. So this is then called the share capital. Now there are various kinds of share capitals. You must pay attention to this. The first is authorized capital. Given in the MOA, this is the maximum amount with which the company is registered and with which it is authorized to raise from the public by issue of shares. It is also called registered capital or nominal capital or authorized capital. So when the company is laying out its objective that I want to be number one in India in 10 years, that is my vision. So in my 10-year journey, I would like to raise X amount of capital so that I can fuel my expansion. So that can be a very large amount and that is mentioned as authorized capital. Once the registrar vets it and gives you a certificate of incorporation, then legally you are authorized to raise that much money. Okay, so this is just a legal stipulation that okay, this company will grow up to this size over the life or or the near foreseeable future, they will rise this much. Issued capital is that subset of authorized capital which is offered to the public for subscription and the remaining portion is not yet offered to the public, is called the unissued capital. So suppose I have an authorized capital of 100 crores and today I am raising 10 crores. Then 10 crores is the issued capital and the 90 crores is the unissued capital. Now, as I told you, when the company issues shares, then the subscribers or shareholders have to write back to the company and say that I am subscribing to these many shares of the company at this rate. So the portion of issued capital which has been subscribed for by the public, that is applied for and allotted by the company. The balance of issued capital not subscribed for the public is called unsubscribed capital. Now in India, the rule is that in case a company comes out with an IPO and if 95% of the issue is not subscribed, then the company is not allowed to go ahead with the IPO. Okay, so at least 95% of the issue should be subscribed for the IPO to go through. Okay, and let me tell you, when ONGC's divestment came in, it was such a hyped up IPO, and people were so excited about buying the shares, but on the day of the issue, the stock market tanked. Okay, it was very bearish and they could not even manage to get 95% subscription, and it became a huge embarrassment for the government. So at the last minute, the government had to tell LIC to come and subscribe to more shares so that they could meet the minimum subscription criteria. Okay, and then it could continue. Now, the next is called up capital. The portion of the subscribed capital with which the shareholders are called upon to pay is termed as called up capital of the company. The balance of subscribed capital which has not been called up represents uncalled capital. So naturally, अगर आपका 10 रुपए का share है, company may call on 2 rupees or 3 rupees of that, and the remaining is uncalled capital. Okay. Paid up capital is the amount of called up capital which has been actually paid by the shareholders, is called as paid up capital, and the amount yet due from the shareholders are called calls in arrears. That means the shareholder still owes this much money to the company and the company can call this later. Okay. Then Reserve capital क्या होता है? Sometimes a company by means of special resolution decides that certain amount of capital would be available as an additional security to its creditors in the event of liquidation. Such a portion of uncalled capital is termed as reserve capital. So sometimes the company may set aside some money as a safety stock to meet any kind of payments in the event of liquidation. This kind of a reserve that is created is called reserve capital. Okay. Any doubts, any questions, please ask. Now, this is how it will look in a balance sheet. So this is the balance sheet of a company, which shows the liabilities and assets of a company. And liabilities are basically all the capital sources that have come into the company and finance the company. So it is shown like this. In share capital, you have the authorized capital of 2 lakh shares of 10 each. Then you have the issued capital of 1 lakh shares of 10 each. So this has been issued. Subscribed capital is 80,000 equity shares of 10 each. So that means in this 1 lakh equity shares, 80,000 has been subscribed. And in this, a call has been made for rupees 8 per share. Okay, so called and paid up capital is 80,000 equity shares of 8 rupees per share. So this is the actual money that is there with the company, in through which it will buy its land, plant, machinery, material, equipment, whatever is required to make the product or service for which the company has been incorporated. Okay, so the liability side will always have what the company owes or the sources of finance for the company. Any doubts, any questions, please ask. Okay. Now there is another reserve created which is called capital reserve, and this reserve is only created out of the following things. For example, if the company has a fixed asset which it wants to sell, okay, so any sale proceeds that are coming from the fixed asset are not shown as income, because income should ideally be generated from the sale of products and services. So any profit that you're making on the sale of fixed assets is put into the capital reserve. Then any profit that you're making on revaluation of assets and liabilities. So a lot of times when the company is undergoing corporate restructuring exercises, then it gets an independent valuator to revalue its assets and liabilities. And you can imagine land, etc., which has been lying with the company for ages, it will now be valued much higher than what it was initially. So any income that you are making on this is shown as a capital reserve. Okay. Then any profit that you are making on forfeiture and reissue of forfeited shares. So if someone has not paid up the call on the capital, then you forfeit those shares. Okay, you take back those shares. So any income that you make there is also shown in the capital reserve. Then if you have redeemed debentures at a discount, so suppose you had taken debentures from the public and you were supposed to pay back 100 rupees to the public, but you have been able to pay back at a discount. So you've only paid 98. So the 2 rupees that you have made is taken as a capital reserve entry. And the profit earned by a company prior to its incorporation. So any money that the company has made prior to it becoming a separate legal entity is also shown in capital reserve. Okay. And the capital reserve is shown in the liability side of a balance sheet under the head reserves and surplus. Okay, so this is basically the capital reserve and what its constituents are. Any doubts, any questions, please ask. Now, how do you issue shares? How does a company come out with an IPO? First, you have to prepare a prospectus and issue that. This is to attract the public for investment. Then you have to receive applications. Okay, so when you're receiving applications or subscriptions, then you have to give the name of the scheduled bank, the dates of opening and closing, application form, etc. So all of that is given in the prospectus. And people who want to subscribe to the shares, they write to that bank and they give in their subscriptions. And again, when the company calls on shares, then again they send the check to the bank. So this is the bank that is acting on behalf of the company. allotment of shares only when minimum subscription is received, which can be 90%, 95%, depending on the country in which you are functioning. Okay. To make calls on shares, that is the first and second installments are for application and allotment. So company keeps making these subsequent calls on shares to keep asking for the money in tranches. Okay. Now, as I was telling you, after independence, most of our shares, IPOs, have been so popular that people have paid premium on the shares. So if the share was for 10 rupees, it is being sold at 100 rupees, 200 rupees and so on. So the company only needed 10 rupees, but the people are so happy that they are paying say 90 rupees more and they're paying 100 rupees. So how does the company account for this extra 90 rupees that has come? The company will show it separately in an account which is called securities premium account or share premium account. The reason is the company had only asked for 10 rupees and the company will only invest 10 rupees into the business. But this extra money will be used only for the following purposes. It cannot be used for any other purpose. So the first purpose is to issue fully paid up bonus shares to the shareholders. The second is to write off preliminary expenses of the company. Preliminary expenses mean any expenses that have been entailed for the incorporation of the company or before the incorporation of the company. You can write that off. You can write off the expenses or commission paid or discount allowed on issue of shares or debentures of the company, or you can use it to pay premium on the redemption of preference shares or debentures of a company. So if you have shareholders who have given you so much of surplus money, you can use it to retire other securities like preference shares or debentures. Okay. So it is only for these purposes that the share premium reserve can be utilized. It cannot be utilized to buy material and pay wages and salaries and so on. Okay. Very important concept. Okay. Any doubts, any questions, please ask. Okay. So again, what is forfeiture of shares? If a shareholder fails to pay the allotment money or call money on his shares as called upon by the directors, his shares may be forfeited by the directors if they are so authorized by the Articles of Association. So we will forfeit your shares and then we will reissue them to someone else who is more interested in making the payments. Now, you must also have heard of issues being oversubscribed. Okay, so coal power issue was 80 times oversubscribed. Here we are talking about 95% of the subscription, but here we have subscription of 80 times. So what happens when the share issue is oversubscribed? So when application of more shares are received than the number of shares offered to the public, it is said to be the case of oversubscription. So in this case, what the company does is, either it can give full allotment to some applicants, so it can say first come first serve basis, whoever came first we will give you the shares that you want and the rest are rejected. Or some companies may say no, let's not reject anyone, let us make a pro rata allotment. So in proportion, let us give everyone little number of shares. So they will not get the total number of shares they wanted, but we will make a pro rata allotment. Or you can also have a combination of the two. Some companies like Reliance also follow a lottery approach. That is, they pull out a lottery and whoever wins the lottery will get the shares. Okay, so these kind of different ways are used to manage the oversubscription of shares. But the company has to declare this method in its prospectus so that the potential shareholders know that in case of an oversubscription, this is how the company will choose who the shareholders would be. Now, there are many regulatory frameworks that work around the companies. Initially, we had the Companies Act of 1956 and now we have Companies Act of 2013. But apart from this, the companies are also governed by the Industrial Policy, governed by the Industrial Development and Regulation Act, the IDRA. It is governed by FEMA, Foreign Exchange Management Act. It is governed by the incentives that the government brings out for EOUs, export-oriented units, or the economic zones, special economic zones, incentives for small sector, incentives for high priority industries, and so on. So government keeps coming out with policies, regulations from time to time for different sectors, and all the companies registered in the country are supposed to follow that. Then we have the Securities and Exchange Board of India, governed by the SEBI Act of 1992. This is the body that governs our stock markets and all the IPOs, shares issues, debentures issues that companies do. And this came in after the Capital Issues Control Act was repealed. Before this, we had the Capital Issues Control Act, where the government used to give licenses to companies and then they used to operate. Okay, so SEBI is the main governing body for all share issues and all trading and everything. Then of course you have various taxes. You have corporate income tax, you have depreciation rates, you have interest expense, you have dividend payments, you have unabsorbed business losses which can be claimed over the next 8 years income. You have exemptions, deductions, advanced tax liabilities, capital gains tax, indirect taxes in the form of excise duties, sales tax, customs duty, and so on. You know about the GST. So all of these taxes and all are levied on companies. So as you can see, the life of a company becomes pretty complicated. But then the upside is that there is no limit to how much the company can grow, because it is there in the public market and it can grow in leaps and bounds and get finance from the public as well. Okay. Any doubts, any questions? Now students, we are covering a lot of very important concepts. If you don't ask questions, if you keep sitting with doubts, then you will stay with those doubts forever. So please feel free to ask questions. I don't know if most of you have heard about these aspects in the past. If you've understood it, very good. But if you have any doubts, any questions, please ask. Okay. Then we have what is called the financial system of any economy. This basically comprises of financial institutions who are in the business of lending and borrowing. Institutions like banks, mutual funds, insurance companies, and so on. Then you have suppliers of funds, people like you and me, so individuals who have savings and who want to invest it. You have businesses also who supply. Yes, is someone saying something?
Sorry for interrupting, ma'am, but Aniket has raised his hand.
Just a second. Thanks for pointing that out, Harshita, because I can't see the raised hands when I'm looking at the PPT. Okay. Yes, Aniket.
Ma'am, I wanted to ask something.
Yes.
It's about IPOs.
Huh?
When there is IPO oversubscription and a lottery system is there, then we is the probability of getting allotment increases if we apply for more lots. Is it something like that?
No, so in a lottery system, the company may say that if you have, say, applied for 10 lots, then we may have a lottery system for everyone who has applied for 10 lots and then come out with people who have got those lots. And typically what the companies would do is they would favor people who are wanting to subscribe for larger number of shares, right? Because then it becomes easier for them. But in case the company's philosophy is that no, we don't want to be partial to anyone, then the company can have a simple lottery where it will put in chits that Aniket wants 10,000 shares, Abhinav wants 20 shares. Let's put a lottery and whoever gets it will get those many shares. And then the second round, third round, and so on. Okay. So there is no hard and fast rule, Aniket. It depends on the company. But whatever you do, you must declare that well in advance in the prospectus so that the shareholders are not, surprised or they're not in for a shock.
Okay. And ma'am,
Okay.
I wanted to also ask about mezzanine finance. Means I heard little about it that if we don't want to give away our equity and also want to to raise finance for our company, then this is one way by which the promote the investor who wants equity are in equity in our startup, but then he gets an opportunity to invest in equity, something like that.
No. Mezzanine financing is basically debt that is given to a startup when it is in its rapid growth stage. So there is a startup which has moved from its break-even point. It was loss-making before this, but now it has started making profits, and basically the faster it can grow, the more money it will make. So it has come up with a new product or idea, and the more you fund in that idea, the more it can market and sell and so on. So when lenders see that this company is growing very well, and then later they also want to be a part of that equity ownership of that business, they give mezzanine financing, which is a form of debt financing, which is only used for expansion purposes. So it is used to buy your long-term assets like plant, machinery, equipment. It is used to fund your operations in terms of working capital, inventory, and so on. So it is directed only towards the expansion of your business. It could be a pure debt, or it could be a debt with a warrant which says that the loan provider has an option of converting his debt into equity. So if I don't want, I feel that the company is growing very well, why should I limit my returns to only the interest? Let me take a pie of the larger valuation of the business. So then the lender can ask for a warrant also, or you can ask for a convertible debenture as well. Okay, Aniket?
Okay, thanks.
Okay, anything else, Aniket?
No.
Okay, fine. Anyone else? Okay, fine. So I am going back. Thanks, Harshita, for pointing out that Aniket was holding up his hand. Please keep a watch because I'm not able to look at the participants.
Sure, ma'am.
Just let me have some water. Okay. So coming back, and Harshita, please tell me when there are 2 minutes left so that I can wrap up the session. Okay.
Sure, ma'am. We still have time.
Thanks. Okay. Now, you, me, businesses, governments, all of us become supplier of funds, because when we earn an income and we spend some part of it, we do have savings and we want to invest it. Okay. Demanders of funds are also the same people. We also demand funds. We want to take a loan to buy a house or a car, or to fund education. Businesses also want loans to expand. Governments also want loans to finance their budget. Okay, so all of we are the same people who are also supplier and also demander of funds. Financial markets are those markets that get the supplier and demanders together. There are two main markets. One is called the money market, which is a wholesale market in which the main players are the government, large companies, banks, financial institutions, and high net worth individuals, people who have a lot of money. Okay, and they deal in wholesale securities where the minimum value of that security being dealt in is 1 crore to 3 crores. So you don't find people like you and me who are retail investors in these markets, and they are called money market. So money market is a virtual market, which is basically where all these large players are lending and borrowing from each other. Okay. The other market which we are more familiar with is called capital markets, like stock exchanges, where companies come and issue their securities to common people like you and me as retail investors. So we have stock exchanges where companies get registered and then they come out with their IPOs. They may issue debentures and basically take public debt from the market. So all of us are players there. We invest either directly or through a mutual fund or a broker and so on. The main aim of the entire financial system is to convert savings into investment. So instead of letting savings lie idle with someone, the idea of a financial system is to convert it into investments so that the country continues to grow, the economy continues to grow, and the entire population continues to make some returns on the money that they have saved. Okay, so this is the financial system of any economy. Basically, if you've studied economics, there are three players in any sector. There is a three-sector economy. The first sector is households, which is people like you and me. Okay, households are suppliers of factors of production like land, labor, capital, and entrepreneurs. So for example, we give our land on lease or rent. We give ourselves as labor for different companies or governments. We give our own savings as capital to companies, government, etc. And we are the ones who act as promoters and entrepreneurs and function like that. The other sector is called the firm sector, firm or company sector. This is a sector which actually utilizes the factors of production and converts it into products and services for the growth of the country. So this is a sector which will deploy a shop floor or a factory or premise, will have a product idea or service idea, and will churn out that and sell it back to the household sector and other businesses or the government. Okay, so the firm sector is the most productive sector in any economy. It drives the engine of growth. The third sector is called the government sector. Now the government sector is a hybrid sector. It can act both as a factor of production entity. So government also gives its land on subsidies and lease. Government also gives its own services as administrative services. Government also promotes companies, so government also has PSUs and all. And the government also acts as a capital provider. So government gives grants, subsidies, loans to businesses. So all of these three sectors together are called the three-sector economy or a closed economy. Now, India was a three-sector economy till 1991 when we liberalized our economy. Then the fourth sector came in, which is called the rest of the world. That is, we opened our borders to the rest of the world, and the rest of the world also acts as both provider of the factors of production and also as a market or customer for our products and services. Okay, so now we are a four-sector economy, also called an open economy. The financial system forms the backbone or the conduit between all of these sectors of an economy. It gets them together and it becomes like the intermediary between all of these sectors. Okay, any economy that is a developed or sophisticated economy will have a very sophisticated financial system in place. Okay, any doubts, any questions, please ask. Now, the second chapter that we would do will look at accounting principles and the formats of balance sheet and P&L. Of course, since you have done MSL 307, you will remember all of this, so it will not be very difficult for you. Now, balance sheet formats are of two kinds. We have the vertical format of the balance sheet, where first liabilities are given and below that assets are given. This is the format that we now follow after the Companies Act of 2013. Before this, we used to follow the horizontal format, where liabilities were given on the left side and assets were given on the right side. So this is the Indian way of presenting the balance sheet. In the US, they also follow the vertical format, but they list the assets first and then they list the liabilities below that. Okay, so these are just different formats of presenting the same information. This is a US balance sheet. As you can see, the amounts are in dollars. Okay, and as I told you, they follow a vertical format where they show the assets first, and then under the assets they show the liabilities and shareholders equity. Now, all of you would be familiar with this after doing MSL 307, but still I will go through the main aspects of the balance sheet. Now, as I told you, the company is a separate legal entity, and every money that is given to it as finance, it owes back to whoever has given it that money. So the company is like a slave. Okay, it is an artificial person. Nothing belongs to the company. Everything it owns, it owes back to its owners, okay, or whoever has financed the business. And that is why whether you get debt or you get equity, that is treated as a liability for the company, because the company owes it back to whoever has provided it. Okay, so it is like a boj, it is like a liability, it's a responsibility for the company. Okay, so you can also take the liability side as something the company owes, and it is a source of finance for the company. Now, whenever the company gets money from different sources, naturally it has to hold it in some form. So either it can hold it in pure cash, but you know that cash by itself cannot generate income. Okay, you have to convert cash into inventory, into material, into plant, machinery, equipment, to be able to make your product or service. So the resources in which the company converts these sources of finance are called assets. Okay, just like the company owes its liabilities, it owns the assets. So the company will own these assets in its own name. Okay, so if it is like over here it is Anheuser Busch company, so all the assets would be in the company's name. Okay, so liabilities are what the company owes and assets are what the company owns. Liabilities are sources of finance and assets are resources that the company has created to make its products and services. Now you will see that the company has divided liabilities and shareholders equity. Now even the shareholders who are owners of the business and they have given share capital to the company owes it back to the owners. Company का अपना कुछ भी नहीं है, एक पैसा भी नहीं है. The company can never say that okay, you know, Mr. Promoter, I have made 100 rupees net profit, so you can keep 99, but 1 rupee I will keep for myself. No, everything is owed back to its owners. Okay, after of course paying off all the other costs and expenses. So when we look at the asset side, the assets are divided into two categories. First is called current assets and the other is called long-term assets or fixed assets. Current assets denote those assets that the company owns which can be converted into cash within a period of 1 year. Okay, so generally in the accounting language you say that within one financial year or operating cycle, whichever is lower. Okay, but in India and across the world we typically take it as one financial year. Financial year for India is 1st of April to 31st of March. And what is a financial year in the US? Can someone tell me? Anyone who's wanting to work for a US company, can you tell me? कोई बोल ही नहीं पा रहा है. Okay, can you take a guess?
I guess it's October, right?
नहीं, कौन बोल रहा है? किसी ने guess तो किया कम से कम. एक मिनट, let me come back to this. हाँ, Aditya, are you saying?
Yeah, ma'am.
हाँ, नहीं, Aditya, in the US it is 1st of Jan to 31st of December. So if you talk to your friends who are working in IT companies or consultancies or whatever in the US, you will say that year end चल रहा है, बहुत काम है, year end है, closing करनी है and all that. Okay? यहाँ पे आपको मार्च में वही चीज सुनाई देगा, year end चल रहा है. Then in some European countries, the financial year starts from 1st of July and ends at 30th of June. In IIT Delhi, the academic year starts from 1st of July and ends at 30th June. Okay, so हर country का अपना financial year होता है, अपना accounting period होता है. So basically, any asset that has a potential of being converted into cash within that 1 year period is treated as a current asset. So typical current assets would be cash. Naturally, वो तो cash ही है, so that's ready cash. Then your bank balance, money that is in the bank, is also almost cash because you can withdraw it anytime, you can write a check and so on. Third is your inventory. your raw material inventory, your finished goods inventory, your work in progress inventory, because this is your basic bread and butter. You are supposed to keep churning out inventory and keep making products and services and keep selling them through the year. Okay, so inventory is another current asset. Then more often than not, when companies make a sale, they don't collect the cash right away. In fact, 95% of sale transactions are credit based. That is, you make the sale and the payment will come to you later. It is not like the kind of transactions we do, where we go to a shop and we have to pay and only then the shopkeeper will give us the product. Okay, 95% of B2B transactions are credit based. So then the company creates an asset which is called debtor. Okay, please don't confuse it with the word debt. Debt is a fixed income security, but debtor is that customer of yours to whom you have sold an item and you still haven't been paid for it. Okay, so these debtors will typically pay you in a week's time or 2 weeks time or 3 weeks time and so on, but you would like to recover your money within that accounting period, or you will tell them ki sir sorry business closing hai to aap jaldi payment kar dijiye. Okay, so all of that happens. So debtors also become your current assets. Then, for example, you had to pay for insurance and you have paid insurance in the beginning of the year for the entire year. Okay, naturally insurance is done like that only, you prepay insurance premiums. So suppose I'm making a balance sheet on a particular day. Now, as you know, the balance sheet is a snapshot of a business. Now, again, I don't know how many of you have done MSL307, because for people who have not done it, some of these terms may be sounding foreign to you. Okay, and hence the importance of doing core courses, because I'm building upon those core courses. Okay, so anyway, if you have a doubt or question, please ask. Okay, unless you ask me, I will not be able to explain it to you, because I am going to assume that being minors in entrepreneurship students, you have done core courses and you've understood the basis of whatever we are discussing here. Okay, so I understand that most of you have not done it, so please ask. Okay, so so what was I saying? I've forgotten. Harshita, what was I saying? हम खुद ही भूल गए.
Last we were discussing about the forms of balance sheet, and we were on the US that vertical format.
नहीं वर्टिकल फॉर्मेट तो गया. अभी हम इन लोगों को कुछ suppose you have paid insurance in advance for the whole year and you are making your balance sheet at the year end on 31st of March. Then as on 31st March, what is the financial position of the company? So then you will notice that, okay, the company actually has prepaid insurance premium of 9 months left, because on 1st Jan you paid. So 3 months have already elapsed. So 3 months का तो use हो गया premium. लेकिन for 9 months the insurance premium is still prepaid. Okay. So this is also treated as an asset, because this is something that you own. You own that service which will be provided to you by that insurance company. Okay. So any prepaid expenses that you have paid in advance are also treated as an asset, a current asset, simply as a corollary. Like liabilities are what you owe to people, so assets are what people owe to you. Okay, so because debtors owe me money, they are my asset. Because insurance people owe me that service, they are my assets. Okay, so it is that logic. Then of course you have what are called long-term assets or fixed assets, like land, plant, machinery, equipment, furniture. Okay, these are all assets that would be used to generate products and services, but they have a life of greater than 1 year. A plant could be for 10 years, 20 years, furniture can be for many years, land can be perpetual. Okay, so any asset that has a life of more than 1 year and will generate revenues for you through many years is treated as a long term or fixed asset. Now the same logic is used when you are trying to differentiate in your liabilities. You have what are called current liabilities. These are the people to which the company owes money and they have to be paid within that accounting period. Okay, so typical people who are owed money are suppliers. So you may have suppliers of raw material or of some service, transportation, or insurance or whatever, and you have not paid them. So you have to pay them in a few weeks or a few months or something. And these suppliers are also very commonly called creditors. So as we have debtors in current assets, we have creditors in current liabilities. Then the other current liability could be salaries payable. So suppose people have worked for me, but I pay them at the end of the month. And today I'm making my balance sheet in the middle of the month. Then I know that 15 days salary is due and I owe it to my employees. So I will say salaries payable as on 15th of March is X amount. So that is shown as a current liability. So anything that is payable, rent payable, bills payable, electricity bill payable is treated as a current liability. Similarly, there may be a tax. Yes, Harshita?
Ma'am, 2 minutes left.
Okay, thanks, Harshita. So similarly, there could be a tax liability which is due but you haven't paid. So you will say that taxes payable is a current liability. Okay. So basically, the balance sheet is like a snapshot of the company's state of affairs. Okay. Now we have discussed all of this in MSL 307 and we are just doing a deep dive into the financial management aspects. So please keep reading, especially for people who have not done MSL 307. I will be putting up this PPT and the rest of the PPTs and material on your portal also. Please download it from there and you can go through it there as well. Any doubts, any questions, please ask. Okay. Harshita, I have a feeling that for students who have not done the core courses, especially MSL 307, they must now be realizing that it is a technical course.
Yes, ma'am.
And if they have not done the background, then it will be difficult for them to absorb everything, very readily and then deep dive. So I guess that is why, even though initially we had 80 registrations, we see very few people in class. So I have a feeling that some of them will, drop the course.
Yes, ma'am. It is being quite happened.
It looks like that. Okay.
Yes.
Any doubts, any questions? I don't want to start anything new because there's just 1 minute left. So any doubts?
Ma'am, am I audible to you?
Yes, Aditya, please.
Yeah, ma'am. So I was asking that I have not completed a 307 course. So can you please put any of the as you mentioning the new terms? So can you please give any of the PDF that can have the terms? We can go through it once.
So I will be sharing the material with you, Aditya. But the fact is that if I start giving you all the terms that we discussed in 307, then हम 405 का material नहीं cover कर पाएंगे. So I will share the material with you. आप लोग उसको खुद पढ़िएगा. And if you have any doubts, any questions, you please ask. Okay? इसीलिए आदित्य, the course is structured in a way कि आपको पहले prereqs करने होते हैं, फिर उसका स्पेशलाइज वो करना पड़ता है. अदरवाइज अगर हम आपको 307 फिर से पढ़ाने लगेंगे, हालांकि हमको बार बार लग रहा है, बट देन द फैक्ट इज दैट यू हैव chosen to do this course without doing the prereqs. So you'll have to work a little harder because all of this in the core we have already covered. Okay, so I will share the material with you, don't worry. Okay, I will share the same material that I shared with MSL 307 people also, but please go through it. You may need to do some extra reading. Come back to class with any doubts, any questions that you have. I will clarify them for you. Okay, Aditya?
Okay, ma'am. Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. Anyone else?
Hi ma'am, this is Abhinav. So ma'am, I had floated.
अभिनव, तुम्हारी आवाज गायब हो गई. I had floated के बाद से.
I had floated the form.
हाँ.
And ma'am, we have the responses now. Only 15 responses so far we could have get.
But Abhinav, we have 80 registrations.
Yes ma'am. So ma'am, would it be possible to email this Google form to all the students?
Sure. So Abhinav, if you can share it to Harshita. Harshita, there must be a course mailing list, na?
Yes, ma'am, there is.
हाँ, तो या तो तुम अभिनव को दे दो कोर्स मेलिंग लिस्ट, या अभिनव तुम हर्षिता को दे दो. जस्ट कोऑर्डिनेट अमंग्स द टू ऑफ यू एंड यू कैन शेयर इट विद एवरीवन.
Ma'am, I'll share the class email ID with him. So when he'll
ठीक है.
mail the questionnaire on that, everyone will receive it.
ठीक है, but Abhinav, just as I was discussing with, okay, someone is asking, can someone send the WhatsApp group link here, please? So Abhinav, can you please share it in the chat box for others?
Sure.
Okay, and just as I was sharing with Harshita, I have a feeling that students, when they registered, they did not know what 405 will entail, and most of them have not done 307, which is the prereq for this. So now they must be finding it a little technical. Okay, so maybe that is why we don't have the net 80 registration. So let's see. You send it on that mailing list. Okay.
Okay, ma'am.
Okay, everyone. So have a great weekend, and I'll see you on Tuesday then. Please read. I'll pull up all this material, and I'll see you soon. Thank you, Harshita. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, ma'am. Good evening.
Good evening. Bye-bye.
Yeah, ma'am.